I'm one of the youngest professional adventurers in the world. I'm lucky to hold 3 world records for different things around the world, but I suppose the one I'm most proud of is being the first person to run marathons on all 7 continents and swim marathons in all 7 seas, a 633-day journey. So I only actually know my granddad through his battles with dementia, because I remember, at a certain age, granddad can no longer drive. Oh, now he can no longer use a knife and fork. Oh, now he no longer knows who I am. When I was 18 and I was sat in the living room talking to my mum, and we were talking about my granddad, he was then towards the end of his battle. That's when she, for the first time, told me about one of his big dreams in life, which was to go off to climb Mount Kilimanjaro after his time in the army. So I realised I have to honour my granddad. And I came up with the idea to run 17 marathons in 17 consecutive days in honour of the 17 years he lived with that illness. But it was the most brutal initiation. Before this, I'd never ran a consecutive marathon. Day 2, Storm Ernest started, which was the worst storm in over 30 years in the UK. I had no choice but to continue on. So my goal is I want to raise £1 million for dementia research, and I want to become one of the greatest modern day adventurers and to change the way that exploration is seen by the younger generation.
Louis, good afternoon, good evening. How are you?
Hi, Paul. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to meet you. I've been following your journey and recently, and what we're going to do is unpack your incredible journey and story. But if you can, just give a quick intro as to who you are, please.
That's the most difficult question, isn't it? An intro. How do you define yourself when you've got this sort of job title? Well, I'm Louis. I'm one of the youngest professional adventurers in the world. I'm 26. I'm lucky to hold 3 world records for different things around the world, but I suppose the one I'm most proud of is being the only person and the first person to run marathons on all 7 continents and swim marathons in all 7 seas, which was a 633-day journey, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But very happy to be here, happy to be in Singapore. I've been here for some talks for schools and businesses, and it's great to be here.
Do you have a nickname, Louis the Great Alexander? If not, we're going to coin it right now.
I think it's naive enough to call yourself a professional adventurer, let alone add the word great to your name. So, well, not yet.
Listen, 3 world records, you're on your way, if not already there. So what I want to do is I just want to share your journey. So you grew up where in London?
All over, actually. I had an interesting childhood. I had most amazing parents, right? Most supportive parents in the world, but we moved around a lot. So by the age of 18, I'd been to 5 different schools, and I'd moved house/apartment 15 times.
Was that because of dad's work, mum's work?
That was just the ups and downs of life, I suppose, for my parents, and adapting as things change with their work and everything like that. So there was no specific reason, but it was just the ups and downs.
What did they do for a living? Because I often find that what your parents do will shape you in so many ways, and it's inextricably linked probably to what you're doing now.
Nothing to do with adventure.
Nothing.
That's all I say. Nothing to do with adventure. Very much a different world. And my mum always jokes that they picked up the wrong baby at the hospital. But yeah, nothing to do with this world. So they've had to learn about it at the same time I have. But very much risk takers in their own way in the world of business and whatever else they did beforehand. But amazing parents.
Yeah, coming from London, it's just there's having lived in Singapore since 2001, and I lived in the US for a few years. There's something about the Brits and the Irish. I'm half Irish. I call them lyrics. Mm-hmm. We've all got lyrics. It's quick banter, and it's one thing I kind of miss here. So I'm really enjoying our chat so far.
That's great. Well, I feel bad because I said no to a cup of tea when I walked in. So I've lost that British.
You have, right? But listen, it's 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening.
There we go.
So let's unpack this. So your grandfather had dementia for many years. Was it 17 years?
17.
And then he passed away when you were 19.
He was diagnosed when I was 2 years old and passed when I was 19. So it was a 17-year-long battle. And I'm not sure if you've had anyone affected by dementia in your family or friends. Yes. And how long was their battle, should we say?
A long time, but they were already. It was my wife's grandmother. She was well into her 80s, early 90s. But then you saw a very rapid decline, and it's the most horrific.
So cruel, and I'm sorry to hear that. And it's a progressive disease too, so you see parts of their life stripped. So I only actually know my granddad through his battles with dementia, because I remember, at a certain age, granddad can no longer drive. Oh, now he can no longer use a knife and fork. Oh, now he no longer knows who I am. Oh, he doesn't know who my mum is. Oh, he doesn't know who my nan and his wife is. Yeah. Doesn't know who himself is. So I watched that battle. The last 4 years of his life, he couldn't walk or talk, and he was bedridden. So when I was 18 and I was sat in the living room talking to my mum, and we were talking about my granddad like we so often did and the stories of his life, and he was then towards the end of his battle, that's when she for the first time told me about one of his big dreams in life, which was to go off to climb Mount Kilimanjaro after his time in the army. Yeah. And that's sort of where everything started for me. But he was an incredible man. Captain Rick Taylor served in the British Army for 38 years, served all around the world, but it was that battle, as you know, dementia, the most cruel one, or one of the most cruel, which ended his life.
Well, obviously, adventure is in your DNA. It comes from your granddad, right? So Kilimanjaro, I attempted to do Kilimanjaro. I was so embarrassed I didn't make it. Mm-hmm. The rest of my crew that I went with did, and I don't know what happened, but it was no joke. And I felt really embarrassed. I raised $30,000 for charity. I self-funded the trip, so I didn't do one of these, paid for trips. Mm-hmm. But tell us about that, because that was your first mini adventure. It's not mini, but it's your first adventure, right?
Well, as you say, I have adventure DNA, but it certainly wasn't that through my childhood. I was a sporty child, but I was sort of the medium in every class and every team. But I wasn't adventurous. I didn't go off on the weekends climbing or hiking. I was never part of the Scouts.
You didn't do Duke of Bennett Reward?
Never did DOV.
Really?
So that first adventure when I was 19, that changed my life. I went out there for him. I went out there for the charity Alzheimer's Research UK and returned home with something for myself, which was this brand new found passion, a purpose for travel, for exploration, for challenging myself.
Yeah.
It was like that 1 week on that mountain taught me more than a year at school. It was life-changing. It was my first tipping point in my life.
Yeah. Which route did you do? Do you remember?
It was, I believe it was called the Machame route. Is it the 5 or 6 day one? There's the Lemosho, which is the 7 day.
Yes.
But also I was the weakest in the group. People don't think this, but I definitely was. I was the first to get altitude sickness out of the group.
Did you take the diamoxin? Because I didn't. That's where I went wrong. Did you take it or not?
No.
Okay.
So I went into that mountain with a lot of ego.
Okay.
So although I wasn't a great athlete at school, I did play rugby and I was in the first team, and that brings a lot of ego for a 17, 18-year-old boy.
Yeah.
The mountains or any adventure strips you of that
Very quickly.
right?
Yes.
So I rocked up on day one, the youngest in the group, the heaviest by far, was probably close to 100 kilos at the time. I had no hiking poles because I said I don't need hiking poles. I'm fit and healthy. I'm 19. And I didn't take the altitude sickness pills. I remember the meeting like the night before. I'm sure you had like that same safety briefing where they check your kit and then they say, right, has everyone got their, the altitude sickness pills? Yeah. Look around. I'm like, no, I don't need those. Why do I need those? I don't want to cheat my way up the mountain. But then I was the first to get altitude sickness on day 2 of the trip.
Really? So that's early?
Day 2.
So what happened? Did they give you oxygen or you worked your way through it?
We had one rule from the doctor, and I'm not sure if they had the same rule of this with you, but they said if you're sick, physically sick, you get sent down the mountain. Mm. And when I got to day 3 and I realized actually this altitude sickness is getting worse, the headache was pounding.
Pounding, yeah.
I thought, well, if I'm going to eat now, I'm going to be sick. So I made the decision to stop eating. So at dinner time, I was doing the awkward thing of pushing food around, pretending, I'm eating, but actually I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I was so naive, thinking, I can carry myself up through this mountain with ego and all these different things. And luckily, I was able to summit and I got back down, but I needed a lot of help and I was, really weak. Yeah. Really weak. So
the porters, the guides are amazing, aren't they? I mean, they do it for a living and they make it look easy. But that, as they say, pole.
They do. But some of them also are really struggling, right? Because they're not even themselves given the right opportunity or the right kit or the right, probably don't have those altitude sickness pills. I remember my porter or the guide behind me, he was like falling asleep during the night on summit night and like his head kept banging into the back of my shoulders. Because
really?
He probably hadn't eaten properly. They'd probably had terrible sleeping conditions on the mountain. They share 30 people in a tent.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
And I know they're doing lots of work there and, the Himalayas and all these amazing places to actually give that respect to those who are actually making it all possible in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
So hopefully things are improving.
So when did you realize, I mean, I would imagine it's after you came down and your headache had kind of disappeared, that you thought, you know what, I'm onto something here.
It was like a spark had just been lit. It was just amazing. I can't really put it to words. And then for the next 3 years when I came home, that hobby built. And it was very natural. So at no point was I thinking, this is going to be my job, this is my career. But it just progressively and naturally built.
Were you studying at that time or?
I wasn't.
You were
so
working?
I was like many 19, 20, 21-year-olds, especially during that time, of course, because they were the lockdowns.
Yeah,
so I was just trying to work things out. Yeah. I knew from day one I wasn't going to university. All my friends went off and I said, I'm just going to end up in loads of debt here and I'm going to be here for the social side. That's not an excuse to go off to university. So I tried to go down the work route, and I went through about a dozen different jobs.
Yeah.
So everything from working in an office to working at a gym to being a gardener for a week to working on golf courses. I just tried everything, and that's kind of like what my dad's done with his life. You just try things and that's how you work it out.
Yeah.
And I did what many young people do as well at that age. I just failed all of them. Not failing because I was ever fired. I was always, a good kid and worked hard, but failing because I wasn't fulfilling the purpose that I found on that mountain with Kilimanjaro. So I went for about 3 years just bouncing between things. I spent the lockdowns working at a temporary mortuary. So I was teamed alongside, the police and the fire service.
Jeez.
And suddenly, I was one of the body handlers. I'm not sure the right technical word, but was thrown into that with no training because they just needed the volunteers and the work. And I thought, well, this is going to be a great learning experience.
Yeah.
I tell you what it was. I grew up about 10 years in the space of 2 months because, we got the numbers at the end of it. And it was like 3,000 people that our team alone had, transferred. It was like the most horrendous time.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from those people, the police, the fire service, who step up when things get tough.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by heroes, but I wasn't one of them.
What you don't want to do. Well, you are a hero, a different type of hero.
Well, I'm not sure about that. But I essentially went through all these plethora of jobs, and it sort of culminated it was the 17th of November, 2021.
Okay.
And I remember just thinking, I only love one thing in life. It's these adventures. And I'd been slowly, whilst the hobby was building, I got into ultra marathons and everything like that over the 3 years. I'd been starting to learn about people who made it a career. So your Bear Grylls, your Steve Backshalls, your Ben Fogels, those who have made TV careers from adventure or writing books or speaking. Yeah. I slowly started to realize, okay, this is an option. It's not easy, but there are people out there who've done it. I, without realizing, started to pick up like small sponsorship deals and things like that. Not financial, but, here's some free kit. Can you do an Instagram post for us? And I had no money, so I was writing my own press releases too and, sending it off.
As you do.
And then I sort of realized at the end of that year, 2021, if I'm ever going to have a chance, it's now. I have no mortgage, no kids. And my parents, although they said, we can't fund this for you, they said, go for it. And you can stay living at home, for a few more months.
That support, by the way, you can't be overlooked.
Absolutely not.
Shout out to mum and dad.
100%. And just that faith, right? Because when you're at that age or any age, sometimes it's hard to believe in yourself. But when you've got two people next to you who believe in you sometimes more than you do, you can't put a price on that value of faith and belief. And that's such an important thing. And I remember making my first website on that day, and I announced
straight away on the 17th, bang, you went all in. I love it.
I made a website. I can't even remember what job I was doing at the time. I think I was working at a golf course. I gave them my notice. And
did you say, what did you say? It's like that Goodwill Hunting. I'm about to go and see about a girl, but a mountain or something.
I would have loved to say I walked in and dropped in my notice and said, yes, I'm off to become an adventurer. So, but I didn't. I probably said, I need some time off or something. I don't even know what I said. and I did what every good adventurer has done in history, and I announced it on LinkedIn.
As you do.
Yes, I am now a professional adventurer. Here's my new website. Let's work together. And it got 2 likes. And I remember so well. And I was like, oh, this is a terrible start. And then within probably a week of making that decision, you realize, oh my gosh, no one's going to come here and do anything for you. No one's going to hand you an opportunity. So I did what everyone said not to do at the time. I took out my first credit card, and I realized I had 3 months worth of money to live to find my first challenge / sponsorship deal / opportunity, whatever it may be. Yeah. But I had 3 months to live and get by in terms of paying for food and everything I needed to, my few small bills at that age. And I realized, well, I'm going to start this career. I need to start with a bit of a bang. I need a challenge, which is, first of all, going to bring in sponsors. It's going to bring in my first little bit of press and maybe a TV or whatever it may be. But also, it's got to honor my granddad, right? If you're starting something for a purpose-driven reason, you can't then, when it becomes a career, go, oh, well, forget about that. Yeah. So I realized I have to honor my granddad. And I came up with the idea to run 17 marathons in 17 consecutive days in honor of the 17 years he lived with that illness, to honor the years that he suffered, my friends and family suffered, the carers and nurses, all the people we don't even see every day.
Very powerful.
But it was the most brutal initiation into a new career.
Well, tell everyone about the storms and what you were suffering, because you had the worst possible start to your venture.
Oh, it was terrible. I remember day one, set out from his old care home. Nurses, carers were there, friends, family. It was really emotional. And then, by the way, before this, I'd never ran a consecutive marathon. So I'd done a few marathons and ultras in the build-up, but I'd never done 2 marathons back-to-back or 3, let alone 17.
So basically, you're a bit crazy. You're just like all in.
Totally crazy. I only had 3 months, obviously, to train as well.
You're a savage.
I was sending thousands of cold emails a week whilst then trying to run as much as possible in the evenings and working it out.
But by the way, I want to touch upon that because we'll come back to this later. But
Sure.
your biggest challenge actually hasn't been in the field or in the ocean. It's been behind the scenes, getting everything working, right? Like sending out thousands of emails. Most people don't have the resistance and the tolerance to do that. They just, like, after 10 no's or 10 no replies, they give up.
Well, it's soul-destroying work, right?
Yeah,
and I
it
understand that because it's brutal.
Yeah.
And when you're getting rejected from a person, that's one thing. But when you're getting rejected from a screen, you're staring at your phone for 12 hours a day.
It's
and
tough.
we can come to that. I'm happy to share advice as well on those who may be trying to start that own journey themselves.
Yeah.
But the 17 marathons was brutal. Day 2, Storm Ernest started, which was the worst storm in over 30 years in the UK. I had no choice but to continue on because I couldn't wait and go again in a few months or whatever it was, because I had that one opportunity.
Yeah.
I think I raised just shy of £3,000 of sponsorship to get me through the challenge. And
So you drove back to London?
I woke up in Yorkshire ready for day 2, and my phone just lit up with messages when I got out of bed, and I thought, oh, these are going to be congratulations messages. You're a hero. Well done on day 1. Go get them day 2, big man. And they were the opposite. They were like, oh, just seen the news. Oh, mate, sorry. Hopefully you can try another time.
Yeah.
This is terrible. And then I walked over to the television, turned on the news, and I saw it was the start of this storm.
Horrific.
And roads were closed down, schools were closed, buildings were closed. It was almost like, when the UK gets hit by snow, it was like that kind of
Everything
response.
stopped.
No one knew what to do.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the privilege of waiting, so we continued on. I was supposed to run up in Yorkshire that day. They cancelled, so we drove home to London. I ran around my little neighbourhood. Day 3, day 4, day 5, the storm passed, as they always do. All storms in life pass, don't they, with time?
Absolutely.
And then I really started to enjoy the project, and I had maybe close to 200 or 300 people come and join me from the public.
That's amazing.
Strangers.
That must have
/
just been
friends of
so
friends.
uplifting.
It was
Surreal.
humbling,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
Humbling that someone would take a day off work to come and run around a running track with you for 10 minutes or 2 hours, whatever it was. The youngest was 4 years old. The oldest was 75.
Wow.
The shortest distance was literally 10 meters. The longest was a full marathon that people joined
Really?
for. It was incredible. Several people who'd never ran a marathon before, friends of mine who had said, I will never, ever run with you, rocked up and ran a half marathon, a marathon.
On that note, just because I don't want to forget it, so many of us have been touched by dementia. Can you talk about any of the more well-known people or the famous people that you either have engaged with or will be engaging with?
Because amazing support.
Yeah, because why? I think that just puts a spotlight on it, because it doesn't escape any of us at some point, unfortunately, in our lifetime.
Well, regardless of where we come from
Yeah.
wealth, from different opportunities, we can all be hit and struck by these cruel diseases. They don't favour anyone, do they?
Yeah.
So, I've been lucky to have patrons like Lennox Lewis.
That's what I was hoping. I wanted you to say, because he's actually my favourite. I think he's the best heavyweight boxer of all time in terms of technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
But, because his mum unfortunately suffered, right? Shout out to Lennox.
Well, he's incredible. He was a patron of mine, and very kind to add a quote and a name to my website and times. And that really helps when you're starting a new journey and you're struggling to find anyone to believe in you, and then you get someone like his level. It's a huge boost, and also brings a lot of help too as well at the same time.
Yeah.
And I had some great adventurers too, like Nick Butter, Jordan Wiley, Ben Saunders, some of the biggest names in the adventure world who were my patrons and supported me. I had Robert Swan, who was one of the first people to reach both poles. He is literally adventure gold or adventure, legacy, whatever you want to call it. And he helped me when I was 22 years old. And even if it's just an email and a quote or whatever it is, that means a lot.
It means a lot. It's very powerful. One of the things I'm really interested in is because you clearly worked out that this wasn't just about putting your trainers on and going for a run. You realized that the commercial framework and the vehicle, the momentum behind it was very big. Did you have idols that you were looking at and you were learning from and you were reading about? How did you even do the groundwork to understand how the mechanics of that would all work?
Well, my North Stars have always been pretty much the same since I started, and that is the Bear Grylls. I think if you look at someone who's had the biggest impact on the most people, who's delivered great adventures but stayed true to his values the whole time, I think he's the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And of course, hugely commercially successful too, which is the goal for any of us when we start a new career.
I think he wants to be the next James Bond. He could be in theory, right? Do you know what I mean?
He could be. It wouldn't surprise me. And then the likes of Ben Fogle, I think he's a great author. Steve Backshall, what he's done for young people and bringing wildlife to the spotlight.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. So I was looking up to these people, reading all their books. But when you're 22 years old, looking up to someone who's 20, 30 years into their career and has a big TV show and a book deal, it's very hard to resonate. So I found it really challenging. And I also found it hard that there was no set blueprint for someone to start this career in their early 20s.
Yeah.
Because most of these big adventurers do go to the military for 20 years. Like lots of my mentors have done that journey, or someone like Nick Butter, he was in the finance world for 10 years and, built him up successfully in that side of things and then made the transfer across. But at 22 years old, when I had no career, no background behind me, I was starting my career, starting my story at 22. To make that leap was really difficult. So I almost thought, well, I'm going to have to write my own blueprint here.
And you did.
And that sounds exciting and that sounds trailblazing, but actually
scary.
Can
you just talk about this? Because you had a lot of different advisors and a lot of naysayers say, well, you should go into the military for 20 years or get a part. What were you hearing and how did you stick with the conviction?
Well, I had mentors who were really supportive, but I also had some people I met who I wouldn't necessarily call mentors, but I looked up to, and they said, you can't do this. They said, they've struggled for how many years, you've got to go off and work for 10 years part-time, and then you can start along the side, or whatever it may be. So there was more doubts than there was support at the start, and that's okay. And it's really difficult.
How do you process that? That's because why I want to talk about that is because I think the people that you really are going to touch outside of the family suffering from dementia are the next generation. Because I think, like my kids, I think when I share this story with them, and hopefully they'll watch this podcast, they'll think, wow. And you're tangible because you're not that much older than them. And what you're doing is amazing. So when you sat down and you were working all that out, how did you say, no, I'm going to stay the course, I'm going to follow my heart, and I'm all in?
You know that saying, add fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
And it's very easy when you're achieving world records and some of the adventures, which come later down the line, that adds a lot of fuel to the fire. These are great things. These are successful things. Giving talks on the other side of the world in Singapore, this is amazing. It's added a huge amount of fuel to my fire.
Yeah.
But what happens when there's no fuel? What happens when you're basically down to your last little spark of that fire and, it's about to go out? And that's what I've realized is when you do something you love and you have that purpose that comes first, when you can look in the mirror and say, well, no one actually in the world believes in me. So I've always had a few people believe me. That's not necessarily the case. But even when it feels like that, and it does sometimes, if you can say, I'm doing this because I choose to be here. I'm doing this because I want to be here. I'm doing this because I believe this is fulfilling the core of my purpose. Then actually that spark actually never goes out. It's always just there. It's lighting. It's almost like one of those joke candles or joke birthday things, which, the light never goes out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. And even when someone does chuck water on it and they say, you can't do this, you can't make a career, or you get thousands of sponsorship rejections or whatever it is, more water going on the fire, actually it just keeps coming back up. It's lighting, it's lighting, lighting. That's easy to say because the harder part is then how do you find that purpose in the first place? That's where I still don't know the answer to it. And lots of people ask that. Lots of the talks I do, especially the school talks, you get the sixth formers asking, well, how do you actually find your purpose? You found it at 19. You were so young when you climbed Kili. That's where I don't know the full answer yet. And maybe that will come with time. Maybe there's no golden answer.
And I'm sure it will evolve. It changes. I'm 48 and things, my relationship with people, money, how I feel about myself, it evolves.
What age did you find your purpose, would you say, if you had to black and white put it on a number?
I think it'll happen when I'm 50. No, I think unfortunately for me, my purpose at the very beginning, it was very micro. It was to help put food on the table for my mum and dad.
Which is the greatest purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, and I couldn't see beyond that. And, when I was a young athlete, I chose what I felt was the safest, but I never pursued my own greatness. And that's why I admire you so much, because you didn't listen to the naysayers, and I think your mum and dad being in your corner is so hugely important because, and I learned from that because I've got 3 kids and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to guide and shepherd them? And someone said to me the other day, because my son wants to be a filmmaker, they said, well, why don't you put him into this type of banking? That's what you specialize in. A lot of people. I said, I'm not going to tell my son what to do. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. And I'm going to encourage him and I'm going to support him and love him through it. And I think there's a lesson to be learned for all of us there.
Well, we've just met and I can tell already you're a great father because that's the greatest thing you could do.
Yeah.
And that resonates with my parents too, because they never once told me to do something or not to do something. The earliest memory I have of my dad was we lived by a golf course at one point And every evening he would sneak into the golf course,
Okay.
shouldn't be there, and he would walk the dog.
Okay.
And he would say in the evening, and I might have been, 7, 8, 9 years old, he would say, Louis, do you want to bring a football down?
Love
I'd
it.
say, yeah, sure, Dad, And I'd go down, it'd be, around sunset, and I'd say, right, Dad, today I'm going to do 10 keepy uppies, 20 keepy uppies with a football, or whatever it was. And I was a terrible footballer. I'm even worse now. And he would say, go on, then do it. And it would take me hours.
Yeah.
The longest we were there once was probably close to 4 hours.
Wow.
Like, it's pitch black, the dog's asleep on the golf course.
But he waited with
Mum's phoning, going nuts, you've missed your homework, you're late for bed. And my dad just sat there, and I have this most stoic image of him in my head, and it will always be the image that comes to first to mind when I think of him, with his hands in his pocket, the dog lead almost like around his neck kind of thing,
Yeah.
pouring down with rain.
Wow.
And he just stood there silently. He never said anything. He never once said, stop. He never once said, keep going. He just let me stand there and try and keep up these footballs and make my own decision. And I always decided to keep going. I always decided to never let him down, always decided to never let myself down.
It's very powerful.
But he never once told me to go or not to go. He never
Yeah.
once said, do this, stop. And I think that was the most powerful thing. He was just like the most incredible silent supporter. But I knew he was right there because,
Yeah.
he was where that couch is, and he was right there for me. And it was the most incredible thing. And almost I see that reflection now when I'm 26 now, when I did decide at 22 to go full time. I see that same silent support from both of them, where they didn't say, this is going to be easy, go for it. They didn't say, oh, I don't know about this, you should go down a sensible route. They just almost said, you think this is what you actually can do and you want to do it,
Yeah.
we're here.
Yeah.
We can't put the money up front to do the sponsorship. They don't come from money themselves. They've come from challenging backgrounds in their own ways. But they said, we're going to try everything we can to be here and help if we can. And those early years, those early adventures, they were my support crew because I couldn't afford to pay anyone.
Yeah.
So when I did the 17 marathons, my mum and dad were the support crew.
They were
the ones that woke me up, helped me get dressed when I couldn't put my socks on because I had a dozen blisters. They were the ones who, they're amazing. Amazing. Did all the driving, the cooking.
That's what people don't see behind the scenes. Now, what I'm really interested in is there's a few things I want to unpack. So you get to the end of the 17.
Yes, yeah.
At what point are you planning the next adventure?
That's an interesting question. What I've learned now is you have to be planning a few ahead.
Yeah.
Because I always thought people would ask you, what's your most recent adventure? What have you just done? No one asks that at all. So I've been in Singapore now for just shy of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
4 months ago, I completed my most recent world record out in Australia.
Which is amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
I want to know the logistics because that was, you're dealing with different weather,
Yeah.
flights.
Brutal.
Yeah.
And we're happy to talk about it. But no one here has asked me what I've been up to or like where have I been. Of course, some of them
Really?
already knew because they followed on
Why?
socials.
They're asking you about...
Because instead they ask, what are you doing next?
But you just spent so many months of your life accomplishing this great feat. So interesting.
It's really interesting. And it's even during the challenges. So when people came to join me in Australia and ran alongside me, or during the 17 marathons, they would say, so Louis, what's next?
Yeah.
And you think in your head, why haven't you finished this year?
Yeah.
I can't count my chickens. This is not
Yeah.
over. But what I've learned is people always care about the future. You're as big as your next project, not your most recent, your next project.
That's a very
So
interesting
you've got to
point.
have 2, 3 planned. I've got the next 5 years roughly planned of what I want to do with the adventures, with the impact for charity, with the big mission and my commercial goals too. So I'm always trying to work a few years ahead. It's very easy to always be planning as well. So sometimes you have to be careful not to get carried away and overlook what you're preparing for and training for now.
But also, you've got to enjoy and savor the moment, right? You've worked so hard. I mean, look, just think about this. You're looking, I would imagine, tell me, you take out the calendar, right, a year ahead in advance, and you've got to be thinking about weather patterns, time of year, so on and so forth. So like, where do you even begin this whole idea? Where does it come from?
That's the only easy part of my job.
That's the fun part, right?
That is the
Doing
only
research.
easy part of my job is the dreaming. And
Okay.
it's all of my adventures have come to me at like 2 or 3 in the morning. You wake up in the middle of the night and it's like, got an idea. Has anyone done this? No. Okay. Has anyone done this? And that's the only easy part. The hard part is then turning that dream, because they are dreams when they start, is turning it into a plan and then that plan into reality. That's the hard part. How do I actually plan this? The logistics, the sponsorship, the marketing, the PR, the delivery, the training. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
All the other stages that come from it. And that's anyone can resonate with that. If someone works in an office or they work in a hospital, they work in a school, we can all resonate with. It's easy to think of great ideas, but then actually to deliver them is the hard part. And it's the reason most people fail, because they give up, because they don't meet every stage, or they try and skip to the final stage. So the idea stage is the only fun part. It's the only it's the only easy part, probably is the right words.
Now, one of the shows that I saw, which is about a year old, where you ranked your top 5 in terms of most
Oh, you watched
challenging.
that, yeah.
I did watch it. I found it really interesting.
Thank you.
But I'm guessing it's changed now a little bit because you've had the Australian adventures since then, right? Does the swim still is number 1?
The swims will always be really challenging because it's true what feels like life and death when you're in the water, and that's hard to replicate when you're running.
That's crazy. Tell everyone, tell the audience about your weight for swimming versus running, because there's a huge, when you told me that, I thought, wow, it's a huge difference in your body composition.
Well, my most recent swimming project was I swam the 7 seas, so 7 marathons, which is 10 kilometers across all of the classical 7 seas, and I became the youngest person to ever do so. And I was 105 kilos for that.
So let's break it down. So which was first? Was it the Aegean Sea?
It was the red Arabian,
okay.
Aegean, Adriatic, Black, Mediterranean, North Seas.
Well, listen, you could definitely pass geography now and get at least an A. Oman's beautiful though, right?
Oman's incredible.
Really amazing.
The Arabian Sea was very nice to look at, but very difficult to swim.
Was it really hot?
It was 31.4 degrees sea temperature in the water.
Yeah.
So
it's just draining.
Looking at my red hair, you can imagine how I survived in that water. It was a struggle. Severe dehydration.
I bet. You must have had a lot of blisters.
Oh, my skin, especially because the swims are so back to back. I did them all, I think, in 40. Let me get my numbers right. I did it in 45 days. So I had a 7-week goal
every day.
Well, you'd be swimming.
Roughly.
You'd swim, you'd then have a few days to travel to the next place. You then have to wait for your weather window. The average weather window for an ocean swim was 3 or 4 days, and then you'd move on to the next place. So it averaged about a week, a swim per week for 7 weeks. And I remember getting to the Aegean Sea, which was number 3 in Greece, and my skin was already peeling. And it was literally like coming off at dinner. It was horrible. Horrible. And you actually look forward to getting to the water the next day because you just think, well, at least it's, my skin's going to have some hydration. Yeah. But then obviously you get out and then it all starts again.
So horrific.
Really challenging.
So you were 105 kg?
105. And then my running weight is close to 85. So when I did the 17 marathons, I finished at 79 kilos.
Yeah. You would have come right down.
I started, I think, at 82 or 83. Okay. Finished at 79.
Now, were you bulking up for the swim consciously? Or you just
unconsciously?
You're just eating a lot of nice Marks and Spencer's food. What's going on? Because that's a massive weight difference.
It's a big difference. It's a conscious in the sense of I know I need to be heavier. Yeah. I first learned about putting on weight for swimming specifically with buoyancy and with the cold preparation too when I swam the Alcatraz. And I did that a year before. I did that in 2023.
Jeez, mate.
And I was the only swimmer on the day without a wetsuit. I remember on the boat, just before we dived in, like everyone's taking off their final bits of kit and jacket and everyone's got these big wetsuits on. Yeah. And I just sat there in a woolly jumper and a beanie, took off the woolly jumper, showed my pale skin and everyone goes, ooh, you're not going to be able to do this.
But think about this. I don't know if you've seen the Clint Eastwood movie, but apparently, some of the prisoners got out and they escaped. Mm-hmm. They didn't have any scuba jackets. They were going in the tidy-whities. You know what I mean?
And they certainly didn't have all the support crews and kayak boats and navigation that we had and all the planning. But that's I remember
choppy.
Doing that and I learned, really
very choppy, yeah?
My goggles got knocked off 3 times in an hour's swim. Wow. Never had that happen anywhere else. And luckily, each time the goggles got knocked off and they fell to the top of the water, and I grabbed it within a second. That's terrifying. Yeah. But I put on a lot of weight for that and did a lot of cold preparation. It helped massively. I didn't struggle with the cold at all.
Does it help with the buoyancy a little bit?
Massively.
Because when I watch some of what Ross Edgley has done, right, and you look at his physique, he looks like a bodybuilder. He's got a ridiculous physique. Mm-hmm. You think, that's not. If you see a picture of him, you would never think this guy swims. The distance maybe 50 meters. Yeah. Crazy.
Well, he trains for aesthetics and athletics, which I think is the most challenging thing. I've never trained for biceps or a six-pack like we joked before we started recording. But I've always trained for the athletic goals of, I want to run in a remote place. I want to swim in the 7 seas. And, my training's never been to be the most fit or the strongest or whatever it may be, like maybe Ross's is. Yeah. Mine is just simply to survive in these remote places and to get to that finish line. Yeah. I'm the only person there, so I'm first place, I'm last place, everything in between. Time does not matter for me. Well, it's about...
That's what I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, because I'll give you an example. When most people go for a run or a walk, say 5K, 10K, what are they doing? They're listening to music on an iPod. And I always say, if you go and do that run, without any music, without listening to an iPod, it changes everything. And actually it's very beneficial. I'm sure you can't be listening to music or podcast, you're doing it raw on your own in solitude. This is about mindset.
Totally, and you sort of face your own demons in those moments too, because like you said, there's no distractions. There's not TikTok 10-second videos or a YouTube video playing in the background whilst you're eating.
Yeah.
It's, truly facing yourself in the mirror, so to speak, and especially some of the swims, like where would it have been? It would have been, the North Sea, the final swim. So I started out in the Red Sea in Egypt, finished back home in Margate in the North Sea. So a contrast.
It was grim. Well, Margate's quite.
It was indeed.
A bit grim.
It was pitch black. Looking down, as you're swimming with your head down, it's pitch black, the water. And then you've got nothing to look at. You've got no one to talk to. You're just in your own head for however many hours.
Yeah.
And the swims took 3 to 5 hours on average. So that's a long time to be in your head.
Do you know what there's a saying, when you look into the abyss looks back into you. And that's exactly what you were doing.
Never heard of that. It's a great saying.
I mean, you think about it, 5 hours. Like, the thing about swimming in a pool, it's very boring because you're looking at a black line up and down. But looking into nothing, it's got to be the scariest thing.
It is, because you spend the whole time trying to push away thoughts of, I'm probably off course here. My support boat have probably driven off. And of course they haven't, they're right there. But, you have all these doubts and, I'm struggling here, this is going
Do you
wrong.
almost hallucinate at some point, especially starting in the dark?
No, I've never had hallucinations in these moments. I've had total focus, almost like I am right here, right now, doing it, like you are in that moment, and total presence. But then I've also had moments where you zone out, and it's almost like you're in that flow state of just do it, and you're daydreaming about different things, and you're thinking about the next challenge. You're thinking, I've got to, send that invoice to this sponsor, and you're just having like real thoughts. You know, I forgot to send that birthday message to a friend. Like, just what we're all going through when we're shopping and whatever it may be.
Now, on your run, I was looking at the list of places. One of the ones, I've been there, Alaska. Tell me, where were you in Alaska?
I ran through the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center.
So you saw a few bears?
I did. I saw actually a brown bear come out of hibernation.
Really?
Which was remarkable.
That's mad.
So we talked about timings before, about the marathons. A big question that kids ask, well, what was the fastest marathon? What was the slowest? And I always answer with the story of, in Alaska, I saw a brown bear come out of hibernation. I stopped for 10 minutes just to watch in awe.
Yeah.
What kind of adventurer would I be, explorer, whatever you want to call this job title, if I didn't stop to just witness and respect the beauty of this world? If I'd gone, I can't stop, sorry, I've got a time, my Garmin's going, that's not real. So there's been lots of great moments where I do stop and enjoy it, and time goes on.
So when you're going to Alaska, because it's not easy to get to, so were you flying through, you obviously Anchorage, you got off there,
yes.
But were you flying from the UK? Where were you coming from?
I was coming from the UK. That was actually one of the easiest logistical places to get to, because it was a drive from Anchorage.
Yeah.
So that was actually pretty easy. And I had actually these incredible drivers out there who they did it all pro bono. They found out I was doing it for charity, and they offered a driver free.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
What time of year was that?
That would have been January.
Okay. So oh my God, that's freezing.
It was supposed to be snow. So I'd been preparing to run in snow. And the 2 marathons before that, so that was marathon number 3. The first 2 were in the desert, so I'd been practicing running in sand, which I thought, it's not going to be too far off for snow. A few days before, I got an email saying, Lou, we've had some really great weather. I was like, okay, this is sounding good, ... It meant all the snow has melted.
Yeah, oh wow.
And it's now frozen over again.
Yeah.
So it became an ice skating rink. And they said, it's up to you whether or not you want to run on this.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we've got to do it. I'm here now. I've told people I'm doing it. And I ended up having to wear, ice spikes.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
Spent half the time trying not to slip over.
You wore spikes for Mont Blanc?
Yes.
Yeah. That was the first time you were using that winter wear.
Yeah. So, well, they're not ice spikes. They were like crampons.
Okay.
So they're very different. So much bigger spike.
Okay.
Much stronger, whereas ice spikes are almost like...
Well, tell us about that, because that, I know, obviously I watched that part of your journey, but it was the first time you were climbing a mountain of that magnitude. You had the ice to contend with. Tell everyone what your instructor said at the time, your guide, because that would have been scary as hell.
Mont Blanc was a big learning curve for me in terms of fear. That's when I started to understand fear. I was a kid who had a few nerves with things, whether it was at school for an important exam, whether it was for a big sports game or something. Like many young people, I had what I think the best way to explain was nerves, because I wanted to do well. I cared. I wanted to make myself proud, my parents proud, my teachers proud. And what I noticed in these early years of the adventures, especially around 22 when I decided to go full time, the nerves have started to kick into my expeditions too. And again, it was the same reason. Well, I really care about this. I want to make this successful. I want to make my sponsors proud and everyone else. I want to raise a great amount of charity. And I remember on Mont Blanc getting to summit day, and my support crew the rest of my group had dropped out. So they'd had fatigue and, just the reality of a mountain, right? It hit them. So I was left one-on-one with my guide, and he was called Fabio, and he'd been climbing in the mountains for 30 odd years. He was supposed to be one of the biggest names in the Alps. And I felt really safe in his hands.
Was it's 4,500 meters? Something like that?
Yes, yeah, I believe
something
so.
Like
yeah, 4,886 or something like that. And I remember we got to summit day, we'd been climbing for 6 hours and we hadn't spoke a word to each other because it was so windy, it was so cold.
Just howling.
Absolutely. So we had these big buffs up our face, and we just, when we need to communicate with hand signals and body language, we're roped together. So if one of us is to fall, we can try and catch each other and save each other if there's a crevasse or, a big hole in the ground. And you're just basically following him, right? You're just following his footsteps and just trying to stay step by step, a bit like on Kili, step by step kind of.
I never got up to that last bit, so I'm saying yes, but I never experienced it.
Well, in the first day, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's step by step. And I remember that suddenly, you spend a lot of time looking down at the ground because you're checking for a safe path. And suddenly the ground below us went from this solid snow, like white, to blue, which was ice. And it was the sun reflecting off ice and creating this almost blue color. And if anyone spent time in the mountains, you'll know that ice is the most dangerous thing. It's unpredictable, it's scary, it can go at any point. Bang. And I remember he just turned around like in slow motion. It was almost like a movie scene, pulled down this buff, which had been protecting his face, and he shouted over the top of the wind, "If one of us fall, we can no longer catch each other." Pulled his buff back up, turned around and took his next step. And I remember in that moment, my body was just filled with fear, probably the most I've experienced in my life.
Yeah.
And I'd been working with this mindset company in these early months, as I mentioned before, about the nerves, to try and deal with it and see how I could process it. And they actually explained in a really wise way, well, sometimes we spend so much time trying to pretend we're not scared, pretend we're not upset or whatever it is, trying to pretend we're fearless, which we're not. Humans are not invincible 100%. And adventurers are certainly not fearless either.
Yeah.
And I think Bear Grylls always speaks to that so wisely, fear is an okay thing. And they said, actually try processing it, accept it, ask yourself, why are you so scared? And in that moment, up a dangerous mountain, Mont Blanc has 100 deaths a year. It's not the tallest, but it is one of the most deadly. I was doing something I'd never done before, winter mountaineering, as you said, first time using crampons and a rope and an ice axe. And the person there to teach me those things, keep me safe, has just said he could no longer do so.
Yeah.
And
wow,
it's understandable to be so scared. And actually by accepting that, by embracing it, it's almost like you're able to turn that fear into focus. That becomes a fuel. And I've tried to honor that a lot more in my adventures. I remember then a few months after that being at the start line of the Hellespont swim from Europe to Asia.
Yeah.
And it's a swim that happens once a year on Turkish National Victory Day. And I was there excited to swim, but I was also trying at the time to build a new sponsorship partnership I'd been working on. And we had one chance for this year to do it. Otherwise, I'd have to wait to the following year. And I thought, I have one chance to get across. And they only closed the shipping lane for 2 hours.
Yeah,
so it's literally like you have one moment to do it.
Yeah.
And I remember at that start line, again, just being consumed with fear, like just terrified. Well, I've not only got now my actual enjoyment of an adventure on the line, I've also got my potential career, supporting one day my parents. And, you start to think about all these big things. And I just thought, it does. And again, the same thing. Why am I so scared? Well, this means a lot to me. This is a terrifying thing to be doing anyway, an ocean swim, which is 6 kilometers or whatever it is. And it means a lot. So actually, I've started asking myself a lot more at start lines, at the halfway point, at finish lines, why do I feel the way I do? Yeah. Process it, understand it, and move on.
I think that's so powerful, Louis, because
Thank you.
My son, he told me a few years ago, he was a Singapore amateur boxer, and he said, Dad, I'm scared. I think he was 15 or something. And I said, okay, let's unpack that. Why are you scared? And he said, I don't know if I'm good enough. I said, fair enough. I'm not going to let you give up anything just because you're not sure. You need to try. Put the graft in. What else? He said, I don't like hitting people. I said, that could be a problem, but the reality is someone's trying to hit you, that might be a little bit different. And I said, what else? He goes, I just don't want to get hurt. And I realized that I myself, in my entire life, in my sports career, in business, I had lied to myself because I always thought I love confrontation. I lied to myself, and through being his dad, now it's helping me in my coaching journey. I realized, we're all terrified. just accept it, understand it, embrace it. And I think a lot of people will, because they're probably looking at you thinking, this guy's not afraid. Of course you are.
100%, I'm afraid.
100%.
Of lots of things,
Yeah.
not just the adventures, of just normal life, like we all are.
Paying the bills.
But how healthy is it? Of course. And how healthy is it for your son to stand there and say, well, actually, I don't want to get hit. I'm afraid that's okay. It's a normal thing. I don't want to hit someone. That's probably a really healthy thing to say as well.
It was.
And then actually, by accepting it and actually by just understanding your own mind, your own thoughts, your own emotions. You know, what I've realized is we can't control how we're going to feel.
Yeah.
Right? Our body and our mind sometimes is not in our own decision making.
No.
But what is the choices we make. And in a marathon, what you realize is your emotions can go up and down within a second. You can some point be inspired and motivated. You see a brown bear whilst running through Alaska, and then flash forward 10 seconds and you slip over running on ice or whatever it is. And those emotions go up and down. They're like an ocean almost. It's quite similar to swimming.
Yeah.
But what we can control is our decision making, and that can be flatline.
Yes.
So what I say when I'm at the start line of a swim or a run or whatever it is okay, I'm the only person here who can take this first step. I'm the only person who can take the last step, and everyone in between, I will start and finish this. And that's my little motto to myself.
I love it.
And that means whatever goes wrong, because things always go wrong in adventure, in life, and whatever it may be, I will embrace it. I will ride the highs. I will embrace the lows, and I will get through this. If I'm tired, if I'm scared, if I'm whatever it may be, I will keep moving forward.
I love
that. And that's it sounds very simple on paper, and maybe sometimes it is in life, and maybe sometimes it's not. But you know, you get to moments like this most recent adventure in Australia, where I ran 8 marathons in all 8 capital cities of Australia in 6 days, 23 hours and 40 minutes. First person to ever do it consecutively.
And how did you get from each? Because you were in Tasmania, by the way.
It was hell.
That's I can't even imagine. Walk us through it, because doing the runs is one thing. It's everything else in between.
And it all self-supported.
Yeah.
Didn't have a single person with me. And it was an 8-month training
You're
camp.
You're a remarkable young man. You really are.
Thank you. That's really kind. Well, thank you. It was brutal. It was so tough. It was...
You're even closing your eyes, like reminiscing.
It's because, the swims and the runs I've spoke about so many times now.
Yeah.
And the Australia, I haven't really spoke about that much yet, because I've not actually done really that many podcasts or.
But I saw you on one of the Australian breakfast shows, and then you came in and you said, like you jogged in and you had blisters, and I was thinking, I bet you do. I bet you. Yeah, they probably thought you were joking, maybe.
When I read that email, I finished on the Monday, got an email on the Tuesday saying, right, come in on the Wednesday onto Sunrise, which is the biggest breakfast show in Australia.
Yeah.
They said, we've got this idea. We want to run it by you. How would you like to run into the studio? And I'm thinking, this has got to be like an Australian gag. They've got a great sense of humour.
Yeah.
And then they said, so please bring your sports kit. So I rocked up the next day dressed similar to this, like thinking, they're not going to want me to run. I'm hobbling here. And they said, do you have your sports kit? I said, well, of course I do, just in case. They said, we think it would work really well. And so I ran in, and honestly, I remember running in, and I had about 15 blisters.
Jeez.
At that point. And I remember like 2 or 3 of them, I'm pretty sure, popped as I just ran in that little bit.
Oh, man.
And they put this really long wire halfway across the studio. And they said, oh, by the way, don't trip on that.
Yeah.
So when you're running on, you're thinking, please just don't trip on national television. And, you have 3 minutes to sum up basically 8 days of.
So what was the hardest commute internally? Well, I'm guessing it was from Tasmania, was it?
So I ran in the mornings, finished in the afternoons, and I flew in the evenings.
Yeah.
And I had a really tight schedule.
So what happens if the planes had to be on time? Like if there were delays, you were in trouble, right?
They had to. And I was flying commercially. I was sat in the back of economy on every flight. So there was no special privileges of private charters or anything like that.
Nothing.
It was just luck. That part of it, the logistics, I planned it really, really well.
Yeah.
But it was luck.
Yeah.
And the longest delay we had was an hour and a half.
Wow.
So
it was nice. It worked out.
Yeah. I was so lucky. And some of those early flights from Brisbane up to, say, Darwin, that's like a 3 or 4 hour flight. From Darwin down to Perth, that's another 4-hour flight. So those are quite long flights where your body, just after finishing a marathon.
So where did you do? What were the cities?
So it was the capital cities of Australia.
Okay.
So that is Brisbane, Darwin, Perth, Adelaide, Canberra, Melbourne, Hobart, and Sydney.
Amazing.
Did testing my geography.
Yeah.
I think those were all correct, and that is the order. I remember finishing. You'd finish the marathon at like 3 or 4 o'clock. And you'd have half an hour at the hotel. That was my schedule to shower, out of the courtesy to the passengers who'd be sitting next to you. I tried to shower after each one, and then get to the airport. So you're doing everything that you do when you're normally traveling or on holiday, ordering an Uber, getting to the airport, going to check in, checking it. And it was like I've just ran a marathon, you're hobbling around in your flip-flops and there's no special privileges. No one really at the time either knew what I was doing. So there was there was no help or support.
Are you having, let's break it down. For world record, are you having to wear 2 different watches? How are you recording it?
Oh, that's a whole different challenge.
Because that's
evidence, yeah.
Because that's the evidence, right? It's not straightforward.
For Australia, I wore 2 watches, a Whoop, had witness statements every day. I had to collect 5. Wow. I had photo evidence, video evidence too, and then GPS data.
That's a whole new problem in itself, right?
My big record, the running and swimming around the world, that took 4 months of evidence checks with Guinness World Records, and they are so detailed, and so they should be, because that's why they're the biggest name in the world and in that space.
Do you like a Guinness?
Yes,
you do after one of these adventures. My goodness.
Yes, actually, I remember we hosted a bit of a party after that, and it was a Guinness themed themed party, which felt natural to do.
Only right.
But it took 4 months, and I had over 100 pieces of evidence I had to provide for that running and swimming project.
Because I had a lady called Natalie Dow who ran from Thailand to Malaysia to Singapore, 1,000 kilometers. So she was doing 2 marathons a day in her 50s. And, at one point she was urinating blood. And one day she went off. She had a guy with her on the back of a bike, and they didn't press one of the watches, and they had to go back. And I can't remember if it was 40 minutes, but like 40 minutes on top of what you're already about to do and embark upon, it's no joke, right? And that's why I was thinking, you're having to think about all of this. And it's the mental fatigue, because you're thinking about, I would imagine if it was just like you were delivered by a time machine to the beginning of each race, that would be a hell of a lot easier.
Or at least have a team to help you with the small things like checking you in for a fly, or
you need a wingman.
But I remember at the marathons, my aid stations were not glamorous. I was using petrol stations as my aid stations. So my lunch every day whilst running was an Australian steak pie.
Yeah.
And hot dogs from the petrol station.
That's
so
the
it
other
was the
thing
worst
about your nutrition.
It was terrible during Australia.
Are you taking this? I want to break down, I want to fanboy a little bit. So in terms of nutrition, are you taking like branched chain amino acids to help you with the recovery of DOMs? You do nothing unusual.
The only thing I take during training camp is I take fish oils.
Okay.
I've been taking those since the 17 marathons, and that's supposed to help with inflammation and vitamin D, just because I live in the UK. That's it. Don't have protein powder or anything like that.
Nothing.
No. Just trying to eat good, balanced food.
Have you researched all that?
I remember meeting a nutritionist 2 weeks before the 17 marathons, and it was the most interesting conversation of my life, because they said, right, we've built out this nutrition plan. This is what you're going to eat every day during the 17 marathon. I'm thinking, finally, a bit of help, a bit of wisdom. And it was like, right, you get to kilometer 12, you're going to have fish and rice. You're going to get to 22 kilometers, and we're going to get you broccoli soup.
Yeah.
And I just said to him, have you ever ran a marathon before?
It's not realistic.
And they were like, no. Well, have you ever ran a 17? No. And I said, well, neither have I. But what I'm guessing is I'm not going to want, fish and rice and
who's going to be giving it to you?
And
do you know what I mean?
Also that. And it was like, I need bagels and flapjacks and, a burrito at the end of it, stuff that actually, first of all, fuels the body, but fuels the mind too, We get great pleasure from food, and it's okay to finish a marathon or whatever it is and treat yourself.
I'm sure you've got a Mars bar or two waiting for you or whatever.
Absolutely. But no, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. And that's definitely something I can improve on for my future challenges.
Yeah.
So that's
what about like having to take a little bit of salt and sodium in order to balance everything out? Are you yearning for that? Maybe not after the swim in the ocean, but
actually, that's another great nutrition I did end up working with for a little while. And we did all my testing. I collected all samples for a few months.
Did you do
collected
blood
everything?
Work,
it was blood work, and it was other, the urine sort of tests and all these different things. And it worked out quite well, actually, because I found out like I'm actually caffeine optimistic, or is it caffeine positive? That's a term which means you respond well to caffeine. Yeah. So some people who are doing marathons, they crash when they have caffeine, so they should avoid it. Yeah. I actually responded well to it. So I started drinking coffee for that reason, because I wasn't a coffee drinker.
It's a good stimulant, and
I didn't crash, and actually I could sustain it. So that was small things like that. I found I responded well to some certain greens, to some certain meats. Yeah. And that was interesting, because it then started to affect my decision making, because it's very hard in the world of nutrition to be told what to eat, do this, open this, put this in the microwave. That's not real, right? Because that's a temporary solution to a lifelong issue of nutrition. So decision making is a great thing. But she told me about hydration. She said, instead of all these, what are they called?
I know what you mean.
The classic electrolytes.
Yeah.
everyone raves on about on social
Yeah.
media, and they charge a fortune for them.
Yes, they do.
She said all you need is a bit of Robinson squash
Yeah.
and some salt in
Salt.
water, and that is
Salt
the
does
same
it.
thing as electrolytes.
It will stop you from cramping and, especially on the swim.
Yeah.
That's where most deaths happen, right? From swimming. I'm so curious because what you're doing, you're on different terrain. So are you having to bring different trainers? Like, you're having to think about
That's a good question.
Because surely you're thinking about grip, you're thinking about just keeping your feet dry.
So for the 17 marathons, the biggest mistake I made was I wore the same pair of shoes.
You didn't swap them out.
17 days in a row.
Oh, really?
So that's why I got shin splints on day 10, because the shoes were so compacted that actually
Do they
there was
say
no
they say
support.
like have 3 and you swap them out every few hours?
They say running shoes take 3 or 4 days for the foam to return
bounce
to
back
normal.
up.
So that's the reason I got shin splints. When I did the 7 continents and I was running through jungles or deserts or Antarctica, I had 2 pairs of shoes. One were an A6 road pair and one were, I think, trail shoes.
Yeah.
And I just used depending which I needed at the time.
Yeah.
So in Antarctica, I just wore trail shoes.
Yeah. I find that stuff fascinating. And then are you having, because you probably would have experienced it, but even with socks, or if you're wearing, like when you were in Antarctica, I know the biggest thing is if you sweat, you're going to get pneumonia. So you've got to think about 2 base layers. You're thinking, but it's very technical, right?
Well, it's far more serious than pneumonia, because if you sweat, your clothes freeze.
You're
it leads
gone.
to frostbite.
Yeah.
And I remember the night before the marathon, this British doctor comes up during our final safety briefing and plays his slideshow, and he says, "Good luck tomorrow, guys, but remember not to sweat, because if you sweat, this is what you're going to get." And he started putting photos up of people who had lost their fingers and their
That's
toes.
scary.
And they were like his former clients or customers, I suppose. And the next day, we were all at the start line, terrified of losing anything.
Yeah.
And instantly people started getting too cold and they couldn't feel their hands. And I had to change my base layers twice because I began to sweat. So
what did you have, merino wool, or what did you have? Do you remember?
I actually can't remember, truthfully. I'm not sure. But they were Under Armour, whatever Under Armour basic things are. So lots of thin layers, but totally covering your skin. So we had like big ski goggles on, which are so difficult to run in.
Yeah.
Hats, balaclavas, multiple pairs of gloves. And then what's interesting about Antarctica is because it was a big lap, so it was 4 10.5 kilometer laps.
Yeah.
Is some of it is away from the what are they called? The Ellsworth Mountains. Some of them are away from the Ellsworth Mountains, and when you're on the other side, you're no longer protected, which means it gets really cold. The wind comes, and then the wind's off. So then you're suddenly taking off your 3rd layer, putting it back on, changing your 2nd pair of gloves. It's a constant battle, and there is no perfect answer.
And the thing about running in the cold, I've never run in that type of cold. It gets into your lungs as well. It's a game changer, right? Like growing up in the UK, it's very different from going for a jog here. People complain about it, but if you go for a run here in the evening, it's actually lovely, But 6 o'clock in the evening back in the UK at this time of year, it's not pleasant.
It's not, and maybe it's good training in some ways for those colder expeditions.
So when you look back at your journey so far, if I said what is the one that really stands out, which adventure thus far do you look at and say, I enjoyed it the most?
Enjoyed it the most. Is a different
It could have been
question.
challenging though. It could have been challenging time, but you look back and thought that was really, when I think that was the one that I really enjoyed.
The one I'm most proud of is the 17 marathons in many ways, because that, now looking back 4 years on, very far still from where I want to be and what I want to achieve, but seeing in the last few years how far I've come, I realized that was the make or break expedition or challenge, whatever you want to call it, because on day 10, when I woke up with shin splints, a chest infection and a fever, and I decided to get out of bed and take that next step, when it felt like the world was telling me to give up, that was my big tipping point in life, because I could have failed a challenge, but actually failed a career before I'd even started. I could have lost success before I'd even gained it. So that 17 marathons I'm incredibly proud of, because I had 3 months of training. I had no one around me, no team apart from some friends and my parents. We were learning everything as we did it. There was no professional support or anything. And I'm so proud of that and getting through that. And that gave me a boost of confidence, a little bit of credibility to sponsors and things like that, which then really launched everything. And I met a sponsor on that challenge, a few actually, who supported me for 3 or 4 years. So that challenge was defining. The one I'm probably second most proud of is Australia, this most recent one, because there was huge challenges in the build up to it. And getting to the start line was probably the hardest out of all of them for Australia.
Wow. Well, think about this. You didn't go to university, but you've spoken at Eton College. You've been to 10 Downing Street.
Yeah, that's
Tell us about those
day.
experiences, because, brilliant.
They are brilliant. They are. And it's interesting. I started these adventures to try and see the world and to learn more about people and to experience, almost unique things. And then what you realize actually is these adventures can take you so much further than that. And actually they can take you to places like 10 Downing Street. And that's incredible.
How did that come about?
I delivered, whilst I was running marathons on 7 continents, I launched a letter to the Prime Minister at the time to try and raise awareness for dementia diagnostics. I realized I only had a certain capacity to raise money for charity, that as anyone does. But if you can get through to the government and you can make governmental change, it goes from raising tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions to raising potentially and changing £100 million in policy or whatever it may be. And that was inspired by someone called Lewis Pugh, and he did a lot for protecting the oceans. And you realize somehow these adventures can bring a little bit of attention and platform, and you want to use it in the right way.
For sure.
So I delivered this letter to 10 Downing Street, and a couple of months later I got a letter back from Rishi Sunak, the PM at the time, saying that they'd made a few changes to dementia policy, and I'm not saying directly whether I was part of that or not, but I hope I was. And then a few months after that, I got a letter from, I think it might have been a LinkedIn message from someone who worked at Number 10 saying,
really?
Saying we worked on your letter and what you were doing a few months ago, and would you like to come in? We have a monthly Q&A series. We have astronauts and authors and all these amazing people. Would you like to be October's speaker? And I thought, okay, well, this is fake. This is not true. This is someone who, is...
Did you double check it was real?
Yeah, I was like, I'm not sure about this. And I accepted the invite, and then I didn't tell anyone about it apart from my parents. And then it got to about a week before, and I was like, okay, I think this is real now, because they're starting to send the security checks and all these different things. And I was like, okay, so quickly scramble, bring a couple of my closest mates. And I brought my coach, Jake, at the time. And we turned up on the day, and we had a half an hour, maybe 45-minute tour of Number 10. My dad's joking with the lady who she served there for 25 years. Who was your favourite? And we're walking around, and we sat in the main room. We sat at the main chairs, and it was incredible. And they said, right now it's time for the event and the talk upstairs. And I still wasn't sure if I was the only speaker or if it was a panel, whatever it was. And they usher my parents and my friends away, and I go into a private room and have a cup of tea, very over the top in a good way. And then you start to hear like a bit of rustling, and people talking, and about 30 minutes of build-up later, walk out to them introducing my name, and you've got 80 of essentially the most powerful people in the country who work for Number 10. They're not part of a specific party, but just work directly for Number 10. So you had someone who works for the Ministry of Defence, someone who works Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Science. I met all these people. Amazing. And they're sat there ready to listen just to me. And it was like, I was 24 at the time. What do I know in the world that I can share with these people? And the truth is, I'm not sure what I did know. Instead, I just sat there for an hour doing the Q&A and just shared my story.
I love it.
And what I've realized is those moments when you're giving talks and when you're lucky to share your story on somewhere like today is people will take what they want from it.
Yeah.
It's very easy to start forcing lessons, and we can all go very corporate and LinkedIn and whatever. Yeah. These are the 7 lessons I learned from the 7 continents. And sometimes I do that too.
Yeah.
But actually, people are all on different journeys. They're all experiencing very different adversities and battles.
Yeah.
People will take what they want and what they need from your story.
You're wise beyond your years. I mean, traveling gives you that, right? And doing all these amazing
challenging
things.
Yourself, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about sponsorship. Let's talk about how we can help you in your efforts with dementia and to keep conquering the world. And before we start that, I want you just to introduce yourself, as you have done on a few of the shows, about being one of the greatest, and I'll let you finish it, because I think this is one of the best overviews and introductions about oneself that I've ever heard.
Well, we all need a mission, right? Regardless of what our job is. Even if you're an adventurer, you need a career goal.
Yes.
And my goal is to become one of the greatest modern day adventurers and to change the way that exploration is seen by the younger generation.
I love that. When I heard that, I wrote it down. I listened to it 3 times, and I just thought, this is brilliant. That's so powerful. I feel like it's a combination of James Bond and Indiana Jones put together. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
Really?
Well, that's so nice to hear. That it's exciting by other people too, and because it's very easy to get absorbed in our own world, and I'm so excited about everything I do, but I appreciate it's not everyone else is necessarily passionate.
Well, you're so humble. So let's try to work out, if people want to reach out to you for sponsorship, for speaking engagements, tell us a little bit, and I'll put all the links how to contact you, but share with us how and what you're doing.
Well, sponsorship is the absolute priority right now for so many reasons. As we spoke about with the charities, I never take any charity money. So instead I use corporate sponsorship to pay for myself, to pay for my expedition costs. So it means if someone donates £10 to charity, it's a separate pot, and their whole £10 or $10 would go to the charity.
Amazing.
So that's what I see as being a professional adventurer. I'm not someone who brings the pots together, because they're very separate.
That's very important, because most people don't get that.
Absolutely. And then the corporate sponsorship, that's my responsibility in my career to deliver to them in terms of talks or publicity or whatever it is. The charity side is separate. So my goal is I want to raise £1 million for dementia research. So if people are able to help with corporate sponsorship, that will help me go on greater adventures, greater impact, greater press, whatever it may be, and then ultimately raise more for charity too. And lots of people say, well, why don't you just take the sponsorship money and then give it to charity? Well, if someone gives me £2,000 and then I go off and raise $10,000 for the charity by doing a challenge which brings in press and publicity and whatever you want to call it, then to me, that's a simple answer.
Yeah.
And likewise, people aren't paying just to give to charity, they're paying because they get the exposure and the publicity and the positive association from being with my adventures in world records. So sponsorship is a great help if anyone would like to get in touch. Speaking engagements is something I've started growing and building on my own. And, you know, here in Singapore, by tomorrow, I would have done 18 talks here in 2 weeks.
That's amazing.
Without an agent, without a manager, doing all on my own, and really tough.
Good for you.
Really incredible. Thank you. And I did a talk at the British High Commission last week, which was hosted by Nick Mehta, you know, His Excellency, as I should call him, Nick Mehta.
He's from Wembley. That's how I came across your details.
He's an incredible guy.
Yeah.
He was really kind, really humble, and likewise from a very different world and background, but excited about adventure. Yeah. Not necessarily to go on adventure himself, but because he understood that we can all learn from anyone.
100%.
Right? Regardless of age, regardless of our careers, our journeys, we can all learn something from someone. And I think that's why maybe people have started booking me to go in and talk to schools or corporate clients or universities. I think is a big one too, because I'm not trying to encourage people to become an adventurer or to leave their job and become the next big explorer, but instead to embrace that adventure spirit into their own lives.
100%. And I think what I always think about is to be really successful at work, in business and in life, you've got to have a spirit of adventure. You've got to have passions outside of work. Otherwise, what's life all about?
That's it.
You know, and more than that, you've got a purpose, you've got a cause. You're raising money for an amazing charity. And I love some of your goals. I think you'll smash those goals.
Thank you.
You know, I really do. And have anything else, any projects that you're thinking about now that you can share with us and touch upon?
I'm working on a couple kayaking expeditions right now. So it's late January, isn't it, as we film this?
Yeah.
And I need to make a decision by late Feb on what that next challenge is. The only issue is these kayaks start to grow as you suddenly need permissions from not just, how do I say it without giving it away, but it's almost from like counties and countries. You know, you need permissions to kayak through certain places. And doing things the right way in terms of for charity, having sponsors, being in the press. It's very important I do things the right way and don't get arrested halfway through because
these things happen when you're crossing lines on a map and whatnot. No, look, I have to say, I'm so happy that you're here today. I've taken a lot from you. I'm 48 and I've taken a hell of a lot from you.
Likewise.
I will connect you with so many people and try my best, because I believe kindness, as I said to you off camera, goes a long way.
It does. And then sometimes you meet people and you think straight away, we're going to do something together. Yeah. And I've had that with this new podcast show, which I've started.
By the way, it's brilliant. I've seen it. It's very engaging. You're such a brilliant natural talker.
Well, likewise. And I'm really excited about it because it's a totally different challenge. I'm more out of my comfort zone, sat in a studio talking and interviewing someone than I am on my own expeditions. So
but you can't
it's
tell.
Interesting.
You can't tell. You're a natural.
Thank you. Well, a good actor maybe. But that show's called If You Can, if people would like to check it out. And we've got big plans for that.
I liked the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Oh, sorry, the judo. Was it judo? It was judo.
He's an interesting guy. Yeah. Jeremy, he's
a Renaissance man. He's done so many different things, right?
Indeed. A bit like yourself by the sounds of it. You know, tried lots of different things. And what's interesting is those values that you learn, you know, whether it was yourself as a boxer or with him as a judo expert, that translates in everything.
And I like the title because it was about mindset, right? Which is very powerful.
It is indeed.
And I think, you know, the thing is now, if you think about, I mean, you're a lot younger than me, but the forum, the medium has changed. And I find myself, you know, I love documentaries. And I love listening to podcasts, you know, and I hope everyone enjoys today.
Hope so.
Louis, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you.
Cheers.